Fragments of Silicon, your home for all technical failures, major and minor.
The wonders of technology. Welcome to another installment of Fragments of Silicon. Twitch was giving us some problems just a few minutes ago.
Yeah.
Still don't know what was going on there.
Yeah.
But it looks like whatever passed.
It's like we might have been able to muscle through it, but I didn't want to risk losing another episode.
I get that. I suppose if worst comes to worst, we could have used the the MSP setup.
Well, I also have OBS set to local record. So, I mean, I could have just cut off the pre-show bits and we would have been fine.
Okay, good to know. Anyway, welcome to once again, welcome to Fragments of Silicon. I'm your host, Adam. Joining me, as always, are Petty Fan, Ogre, Twilight, and Galax.
Yo.
Hi. Yo.
I kind of want to get to the news because we've lost a couple of minutes here, and we got a big interview to do. So, Ogre, you start us off because you volunteered.
Let's see. Not much happening. Recording's going fine. It's been warm here for some reason for April.
Same.
Yeah, we had to turn the air on. Let me see. Yeah, not much else going on. The saga of my dentures is finally fulfilled. So yes, I finally have dentures now, so I can finally applaud with my teeth. It's still gonna need some adjusting, I can tell you that much. Thankfully, I go in for an appointment tomorrow for a cleaning, so hopefully get some work done there, but other than that saga's done with now. I told Naka the other day, it's like, man, could you imagine if I waited till now? Till he came back and did the recording and everything.
What did he say?
That would have been a long time.
Yep. But now that saga's villain is over with, we move on to a new saga with Petty Fan.
I'm guessing that's a segue?
That's the segue, because we're going
the segue is the dumb motorized scooter thing. That was a transition phrase.
Because we're going from my Frieza saga to your Cell saga that's confusing, keeps going back and forth, and honestly at some point you don't even know why it happened.
Accurate. Well, I guess the big thing is Monday I went to have a doctor's appointment, and apparently I'm going to need knee surgery. Because I guess some tendons in my knee aren't symmetrical, and that's what's been causing my pain. So I have no idea when they're going to actually do the surgery, but I see the doctor who's doing it May 22nd, and then I guess we're going to figure out a date then.
Those tendons can be a tricky bunch.
Yeah. I don't know how much of the show, if any, I'll miss. Like, I could, have it scheduled where I'll be up and around, in the time between shows. I could be on bed rest for a few weeks, I don't know.
Well, if you're lucky, you could broadcast from bed.
I don't have anything to broadcast with, because I don't have the money for a new laptop.
So, we'll deal with that as it comes.
Yeah. Outside of that, I've mentioned it's already been hot. So, yay. Um, my dad just had surgery yesterday to remove a hemorrhoid, so that's been fun. Um, Other than that, not a whole lot's been going on, just like video games and stuff.
All right. Alex, you're up.
Honestly, most of my news from recently is that work is continuing to be kind of stressful. I may be getting my hours cut back, or rather, the increase in my hours might not have actually been approved all the way up, so we'll see how that goes. Um, so I might have more time for show stuff, but I also might not have as much take home or whatever. So, well, we'll figure that out as it comes. Um, Video game wise, nothing too exciting. I had fun playing the games for last week's reviews, and I've continued playing, I mean, mostly Shovel Knight, and I've continued playing Shovel Knight a little bit, but working on finding time for the next one, and
At least they finally gave us a release date for the 3DS version.
yeah, I was glad to get that, and it's, next week?
Yeah.
25th?
Yeah. I mean, luckily I had the Steam version, and I was able to play on that, but, because I wanted to grab the Steam version before the price went up.
Anyway.
So yeah, and I've continued to be playing Breath of the Wild a little bit when I have time. Other than that, not a whole. Oh, weather-wise, it had been really warm a few days ago, but then like the last 2 or 3 days, there's been like it's been down in the 40s, and today is rainy, but it's supposed to be warmer tomorrow, so that could be nice. Other than that, I'm just kind of worn out because of stress about the work stuff, so I will pass the baton to Twilight, I think.
Yep, I'm next. Well, like everyone else has said, weather's been nice besides the occasional rain. And with spring coming in, we got a new cat. A
Oh
stray.
man.
Oh, maybe.
That's how we got our cat.
Yeah, so we got two cats now. A little orange tabby, though. At the moment, he's not used to it, so he hides every now and then. And just in time to start digging the flowers and pooping in them.
Aw.
Yeah.
I don't think that warranted an awe.
I was gonna say, it's like you can tell when a cat owner's in the conversation. It's like, yep, the cat's coming out and pooping everywhere and digging up everything. Oh, that's so adorable of it.
Luckily, it's not usually too hard to train them not to do that. Well, it's not too hard to train them not to poop in things. It can be kind of hard to train them to not dig up flowers.
Well, anyway, besides that, we'll see how the whole cat thing goes in the future. But besides that, been playing games, and that's about it. And I guess that's you, Adam.
Right. Let's see. Now, my news is shit I have to be vague about because, well, family matters.
Going to Vegas?
What? The classified?
Well, it's more.
Did the redacted, embarrassing family stuff can't talk about that?
It's more. I'd really rather not talk about it because.
No, that's fine. I was just joking.
It's just some ugly shit, and it was like, and my, and it's causing a strain.
Honestly, feels like me and Twilight are the ones that came out on top this week.
Well, it's I mean, it's distant, but it's concerning because well, my brother might end up getting divorced again.
Oh, that's not good.
Ooh.
Yeah, so yeah.
I don't want to step on too many toes, but the again kind of feels like it warrants a wah-wah.
Don't. Just believe me. it's like I said, it's a lot of bad shit. That's all I can say.
Hmm.
At least in a public venue, and it's like it's not for certain, but things are looking rocky. Maybe they'll work it out. I don't know, but we'll see. No. Like, like I said, it's just something that's been stressful, for obvious reasons. I hope.
Hmm.
Anyway, that's about it for my news. Oh. So on that note, we shall roll along to the interview portion of our broadcast. And joining us this week, this day, is our good friend Tom Crago of Tantalus Games.
Hey, fellas.
Hey, how you doing?
I'm good. Good to be talking to you again.
Indeed, it's been a few years.
I was trying to remember, maybe like 3 years or even more.
Not that long. Like, it was. I do remember it was a good time before Twilight Princess HD got revealed.
Well, I don't think, we could even talk about Twilight Princess HD. I suspect that we were probably working on it at that time, but a little too soon to reveal it, I suppose.
Well, I remember that because it kind of blew up in the larger news sphere. Like, I remember
you guys got me. You guys got me in trouble. You must have caught me at a vulnerable moment and managed to extract some exclusive news out of me, which was.
It wasn't news. It was a tease. Yeah. You mentioned that you were working on your biggest project.
That's right. That's right.
And I just remember, like, everyone was trying to figure out what it was. And I don't think anyone connected the dots to Twilight Princess.
No, it was amazing, actually. And you know what? It's really hard to work on a game that has that big a profile for that long, and for the cat not to get out of the bag. Coming back to your conversation earlier about cats, and no one guessed it. And bear in mind that here, we have a huge team of human beings making these games, and for everybody, not to tell their friends and not to tell their family, and for word not to get out is a pretty big achievement. So we managed to do that with Twilight Princess HD.
Yeah, well, I think part of the thing is nobody outside of Japan has ever worked on a Zelda game before.
That's correct.
The CDI games do not exist as far as I'm concerned.
As far as Nintendo is concerned as well.
Yeah.
Uh-huh.
Yeah. Anyway, so I suppose the big question is, how did you manage to land that project?
Yeah, look, it's an interesting one. I mean, we had a game of ours published by Nintendo in the past. That game was called Top Gear Rally on the Game Boy Advance, which we developed originally for a very small Japanese publisher called Kemco. And Nintendo liked it, so they decided to publish it as a second-party title. And in the course of building that relationship, I was able to go to Kyoto a couple of times, and obviously, when you get the opportunity to go to Nintendo headquarters and meet people there, these are relationships that you want to nurture when you're making video games. So that's what I did, and I kind of kept those lines of communication open. But I think the big thing actually for Nintendo was when we did Mass Effect 3 on Wii U. So, we have these two labels, Tantalus and Straight Right, and we tend to put the more core titles under the Straight Right label. And the two big ones that we did on Wii U were Mass Effect 3 and Deus Ex Human Revolution. And Nintendo were pretty impressed by those games technically, I think. So they liked how we'd taken the original games from PC and console and brought them onto Wii U. So when they were thinking about a Zelda title and looking around for external developers, then it's kind of a pretty short list, of studios who would kick some goals on the Wii U at that point. So they approached us, which is a pretty nice phone call to receive when you're asked if you'd have any interest in working with The Legend of Zelda. So yeah, we jumped up and down in excitement and then commenced the fairly long process of convincing them that we could do that job.
How long did that take?
To convince them that we could do it? Look,
Yeah.
several months. I mean, they're obviously incredibly meticulous company, and we're talking about a beloved property, one of the most beloved properties in the whole house of Nintendo. So we approached it very diligently and carefully, and we went to Kyoto a couple of times to meet with Aonuma-san and his team and to talk to them about the work that we'd done and what we proposed to do on Twilight Princess. And then there are a series of experiments and tests and trials and so on before you have the opportunity to actually go into full development. And we were fortunate that we got that opportunity.
No doubt, no doubt. And how involved was Nintendo in the oversight of this project?
Well, very, very involved. So Aonuma-san himself, and obviously he signs off on everything. It's his game. So at all levels, he was omnipresent. And then a team of people over there in Kyoto dedicated to the game. So, daily conversations, very regular calls, a bit of back and forth between us here in Melbourne and Nintendo in Kyoto, and regular builds and reporting and all those things. So yeah, absolutely, they were extremely hands-on.
Did they ever go down there to Melbourne?
They didn't need to, actually. They were always welcome, but it tended to be that we would go and visit them there. And obviously, in the modern age, there are video calls and Skype calls and all the rest of it that we were able to do on a very regular basis. And look, we're used to working with companies all around the world. There aren't any video game publishers in Australia, so every game we've ever made, 40 plus titles over more than 20 years, we've made them with companies on the other side of the world. So we're kind of set up to do that as a developer down here.
And right, so what was your what did you do to update Twilight Princess into the HD generation?
Yeah, look, I mean, we touched every single art asset in the game. So we worked with every element to up-res it and to improve it and to make it look better on the Wii U while remaining sympathetic to the original versions of that game. So there was a huge amount of work in that. We added this new amiibo functionality, so the Wolf Link amiibo, and we built a new section of the game called Cave of Shadows where you can use that amiibo specifically. There's a hero mode, which is something new, but I think the main thing for me is just the gamepad controller and implementing that functionality. So for inventory, but mostly for map view. So it feels a different experience playing the game using that gamepad controller. And look, there are other bits and bobs as well. You work on a title like this, and ultimately you have to stay faithful to the original. You don't want to do anything too kind of wacky that might irritate fans who consider the original title to be one of their favorites or one of the greatest games in the series. So you have to have a gentle hand, but where possible, you want to make improvements, because with every conversion we do, we want it to be the definitive version. We want people who have played the original and who've played ours to say, yeah, well, for whatever reason, the Tantalus game was better than the original. It had these new features, or it looked better, or there was this cool thing, or that excellent feature. So that's always the goal. We'll sometimes succeed.
And do you think you accomplished that goal with Twilight Princess HD?
Well, I wouldn't be so presumptuous as to say that, not by a long stretch. But I can only say that we were happy with the extra features that we added, and really, we're playing to the strengths of the Wii U in the case of the gamepad. But I think with these sorts of games, and Mass Effect and Deus Ex are good examples. It's just kind of handy to have that touchscreen and that gamepad. It was a cool feature of the Wii U, which unfortunately wasn't enjoyed by enough people. But yeah, you put all that stuff that you'd otherwise be using, a 6-axis controller or a keyboard and mouse. You put it on that gamepad controller, and for me, it's just faster. It's more intuitive. It's an easier way to navigate and an easier way to play.
That was certainly the most utilitarian use of the gamepad, and it wasn't just like there, but like the DS and 3DS had that functionality as well.
Yeah, I guess so. But remember the beauty of, I suppose the beauty of the gamepad is that you're able to, you genuinely got two screens in terms of your experience of the game. You're looking at the TV screen, and at times you're looking down at your map or your inventory or whatever on your gamepad screen. Look, I thought it was cool, especially for those types of games. Not for every type of game. You don't really need it for a racing game, but for those adventure games or role-playing games, strategy games, I think it's pretty handy.
Right, and were there any ideas that you came up with that didn't make it into Twilight Princess HD?
Oh, literally hundreds. That's the way it works. So for any video game you make, and even for games that are ostensibly conversions, our job as the developer is just to throw ideas at the publisher or at the creators of the original game. So that's what we do. We come up with documents and mock-ups and suggestions, and at the end of the day, very, very few of them are taken up because some of them are a little bit left field or out there, and sometimes we get them across the line, but a lot of times we don't. So on Twilight Princess HD, as with every title, yeah, there are a bunch of things that we'd suggested that we could have done, and I can't tell you what any of them were.
So what's the inspiration / direction breakdown on the Cave of Shadows and the inclusion of the amiibo functionality? How much of that came from you, and how much of that came from Nintendo?
Well, it actually came pretty late in the day, so we had talked with Nintendo about amiibo functionality, but the great thing that happened, of course, was that we were able to incorporate an all-new amiibo into the title, which is exciting. So, yeah, that was a conference call that we had with Aonuma-san to talk about, well, how could we use this amiibo? What would be the best way to incorporate it into the title? And yeah, I suppose that's an example where we suggested building new areas or more areas and making it having even more functionality within the title, but we were kind of made to narrow our focus a little bit in order to be realistic about the time constraints and so on in order to ship the title. So what we ended up with was the Cave of Shadows, which I think is a pretty neat use of that amiibo.
And of course that now feeds into the new Zelda game, because that when you use that amiibo in Breath of the Wild, your progress in the Cave of Shadows determines how many hearts your Wolf-Link buddy has.
Absolutely. It's pretty cool, huh?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And so when bringing the game up to HD standards, did you work from the original assets?
Oh, absolutely, yeah. So you get all those assets, all the textures and all the models, and you work with those in order to create the new game. So, roomfuls of artists working day and night in order to up-res these textures and make them look cool in HD.
And this is based primarily or entirely on the GameCube version?
We certainly had the code base for both the GameCube and the Wii version, but the art assets, ostensibly the same between those two versions. So we'd play both to look at the original, but probably to be honest, probably more so the Wii version.
Well, the main reason why I say that is because the Wii version was mirror flipped.
Yeah.
From the GameCube version, and this one goes back to the original orientation.
Yeah, that's right. Look, I suppose for convenience, in terms of, I'm not talking here about gameplay. I'm talking purely about fidelity. The visual quality or how these assets look in game. It was more convenient to compare it to the Wii.
I guess that makes sense. It's higher resolution and stuff.
Exactly. It's closer to. It's one step closer to the target platform, the new target platform of the Wii U.
Mm-hmm.
And I suppose along those lines, did any thought of having the Wii motion controls or the Wii orientation enter into the conversation here?
Look, it may have. I don't recall actually. I presume we were given direction from the outset by Nintendo in terms of control. I mean, these sorts of things are discussed fairly on in a project. I don't remember the way that particular conversation went. It's possible that it was a very short conversation and we were told which controllers to support and which orientation and so on.
I think outside of like roll goal, I think the motion controls in Twilight Princess were fairly simple anyway.
Mm-hmm.
Like the sword swings are just, it's the equivalent of pushing a button.
Yeah.
Well, the fact of the matter is, Twilight Princess on the Wii was a quick and dirty port.
Would you say that? Would you say that about Breath of the Wild on the Switch?
Pretty much yes. in terms of time and technology, like apparently, like reading some of the developer interviews, they were I think when they announced that the game was coming to the Switch, the words "good luck" entered afterwards.
And the whole thing about taking out the gamepad functionality because it improved user experience or something, that may be true, but it's also because the Switch doesn't have two screens.
Yeah, I'm not saying that's a bad thing or anything. It's just given the time constraints of the project, they didn't really have any options.
Well, look, I guess it's a kind of similar scenario. What one imagines, in that these are games that take a long time to make, and when you're Nintendo and when you have new hardware coming out, the temptation is to release it for that too. So in the case of Twilight Princess, and we presume in the case of Breath of the Wild, it came out on two platforms, the old and the new, at more or less the same time.
I mean,
it's been a while, but the Zelda games have been coming out approximately one console generation behind schedule since Twilight Princess, at least.
Yeah. From a business perspective, it was absolutely the right thing to do both times. I mean, Twilight Princess is actually like either the or the second best-selling Zelda title ever. And that's the Wii version, and there have actually been more Breath of the Wild units sold than Switch units at this point. I'm not even making that up.
Well, because some people need two copies. Is that why?
It's either they don't have a Switch yet, or they want two copies because they bought the collector's edition.
Yeah,
it's probably both. Right?
Yeah. I would love it if that were true. Tell me that's true. That statistic.
It is. I think about 20,000.
Yeah, currently there's 20,000 more Breath of the Wild cartridges been sold than there are Nintendo Switches.
That's fantastic. I love it.
So, how long did you end up working on Twilight Princess HD, and how many people were on the project?
I knew you were going to ask me questions like this about games that were made years ago that I'm not going to be able to recall the answers to. But look, I mean, it must have been 18 months plus, and the team, well, up to maybe like 40 people at various points. So, yeah, I mean, a big game, even in its adaptation in terms of time frame and team size.
And ultimately, were you happy with the quality of the product that ended up getting released?
Oh, absolutely. No, we're really proud of it, actually. I mean, you're starting from a pretty high base in terms of the quality of the original, but yes, I thought we treated it in a very affectionate way, and I was completely content with the result that we achieved. And I think that fans, gamers liked it as well. The feedback that we got was overwhelmingly positive, and that's what it's all about.
Yeah, I remember hearing the feedback was generally positive. I suppose on the flip side, if you had more time, money, resources, whatever, is there anything you would have liked to have done further with Twilight Princess HD?
No, look, I think, as a developer, you always want to do more, make it bigger, add more features and so on. So, yeah, I mean, there is a list of extra features sitting on a server here somewhere with probably 20 or 30 ideas of things that we could have done, and ultimately probably the decision not to add those features was the right one from Nintendo. But as creators and as people who are inspired by doing cool shit, you always want the opportunity to be able to implement those ideas. So absolutely no regrets, and we're proud of what we achieved. I'm very proud of everybody here who worked on that game. But there are always things you look back on and think it would have been nice to add that feature or to have had the chance to play around with that.
Right. Before I press forward, I want to see if my colleagues have any more questions about Twilight Princess HD.
Well, I have a
think I've asked
question
most of
about.
mine.
I have one about the amoeba functionality, since it uses data from the what's it called? For Breath of the Wild, it uses the Wolf Link's data. Did Nintendo have to come to you for that, or is that just something they did on their own?
Well, I mean, they have our source code. Obviously, they own it. So yes, I mean, I don't believe that we are involved in that in any meaningful way. But we obviously wrote that code. So yes, in the course of delivering the title to them, they certainly had the right or the option to implement it into future titles. But no, we weren't involved in Breath of the Wild in any way.
Yeah, I think all they need to know is how the data is stored on the amiibo, which they were probably largely in charge of in the first place.
Yeah, I suspect that's right.
That's it for me.
Galax, I think you had something?
No, I was just saying I think I've asked most of my questions.
All right. Ogre, do you have anything?
No, I'm pretty good.
All right. Twilight?
I'm good.
All right. All right. Moving forward, Zombie. For those who missed this, it was a Zombie U got ported to the PlayStation 4, Xbox One, and PC. Not last year or something like that.
It's come back a couple of years. It came out August 2015, actually.
It's been more time than I realized.
Year and a half. Yeah.
Because it was a popular game, and the Wii U was not a system with a huge user base.
Well, it was a good game on Wii U, wasn't it? I mean, it was one of the best reviewed titles on that platform. And Ubisoft obviously spent a bit of money on it, and they wanted to see it have a new life, or they thought that the game deserved a broader audience. So again, they came to us and said, "What do you think about porting this to Xbox One, PS4, and PC?" We said, "Sure."
Though the fact that it was one of the better games on the Wii U does bring up one of the what must have been one of the challenges of localization, which is that Zombie U was a game that is very much designed for the Wii U and its asymmetrical controller setup.
Yeah, absolutely. So, look, I think Control was the biggest challenge that we faced on on that title. As it is so often, but specifically on that title, because as you say, it was built from the ground up as a standalone Wii U title. So we had to work with that, and I think, but that said, we got so much for free. I mean, this is a kind of big, beautiful, elaborate world that had been built with a core gameplay that was pretty compelling. So there are a bunch of things that we didn't need to check off. We didn't, for example, have to touch many/any art assets in that game. So rather than having roomfuls of artists, we could spend a bit more on game designers and have people tweaking that control mechanic.
Did the that was for previous gen systems, because I remember like the Xbox and the Xbox 360 and the PlayStation 3 had second screen setups going there for a bit. Like there was the smart glass, and then there was like the PS remote feature. But
yeah, dude, no, we didn't do any of that. Not for Zombie.
Yeah. Well, I suppose the question is, how did you eventually get around the the control issues and the UI, the everything with the second screen?
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess what you do is you sort of think, you play the game on Wii U and you think, well, what's this game a bit like? Or let's think of the 5 best games that this is a bit like, and you go and play those games and you look at how they managed control, and then you just bastardize the best bits of that and make it your own. So I suspect that would have been the process that our game designers followed, because at the end of the day, when you can describe the gameplay in Zombie U in terms of the things you do as a player, or the phenomenological experience that you have with a controller as you move around that world, and there are plenty of games that are a bit like that. So rather, I think contemplating drawing a straight line from the Wii U control methodology to, say, the PlayStation 4 control methodology, better to sort of take a bigger picture approach and say, okay, well, here's what we want the player to be able to do in this game. Let's look at other games where this has been done well, and carve out our own kind of unique version of that. So yeah, not a linear progression from one platform to the next, rather a sort of, let's take a top-down view and think about the best way of making it work on these new platforms.
And ultimately, do you think you were successful in bringing Zombie to these new platforms?
Yeah, look, I think so. And again, the game was pretty well reviewed. It's always interesting with reviews, like, ports or conversions. They're fairly broadly shit canned as a general view. Like they tend to get far poorer reviews than the original title, even where there are new features added or upres or whatever. And that's fine. I kind of get why that happens. But yeah, Zombie, the games that we developed, yeah, they stood up relatively well against the Wii U original, which of course was a very popular game, and we came out some time after that original too, of course, which never helps with your review scores.
And I remember Zombie coming out at a discounted price as well.
Yeah, I believe that's right, and certainly was available on Steam too. So
about $20. I mean, it's a good value, but it's also, budget releases also tend to diminish in favorability.
Yeah, I mean, I guess if you're a PC reviewer, you maybe never heard of the Wii U, as a platform, and you're seeing this game on PC for $20 and playing it and reviewing it, yeah, maybe that impacts your perception of where it should sit alongside other similar titles. I don't know. It's possible.
Fair enough. Anyway, moving forward to the present. So you're working on the Nintendo Switch now, correct?
We are, and we have been for some time. We've always made games for Nintendo platforms, so when a new one is announced, or when there's a whisper of a new one, we're always pretty enthusiastic. So Yes, for us, the Switch represents a pretty tremendous opportunity, and we've got a couple of titles that will be coming out in the next few months. Both ports, as it happens, but both pretty cool.
Right, and so as first up, how is it working on the Nintendo Switch versus, say, the Wii U?
Well, it's similar in some ways. The development environment, the architecture, and so on is an improvement on the Wii U. So in that sense, it's easier and better for our programmers to work on, which is terrific. You know, Nintendo have done a very good job on the hardware side with this thing. Certainly, when the dev kits arrived, and it's always a very happy day when you get these boxes that come onto your doorstep and they've got cool new technology in it, and you sort of open it up and you think, "What the fuck is this? You know, how are we gonna do interesting, cool stuff with this?" And we very much had that experience when our then NX dev kits arrived, and it works well. Like I say, from a tech standpoint, from an engineering perspective. It's as good as we've ever seen from Nintendo.
Neat. And did you approach Nintendo about getting dev kits, or was this something like through your partners at Sega?
No, well, I suppose we're in a sense somewhat part of the Nintendo family now that we've developed a Zelda game. So we're relatively well looked after in terms of access to information and technology and hardware. So when the time was right, Nintendo were able to share their plans in relation to the Switch with us, and then a short time after that, we're able to get our hands on some hardware.
That story is definitely consistent with others we've talked to about the dev kit situation.
I mean, they're always like hen's teeth, right? So everybody wants them. There aren't enough to go around. So I suppose there's a hierarchy in terms of where that hardware ends up in the early days.
Yeah. Like I said, just from other, talking to other developers, both who have and have not, and didn't have dev kits, there was definitely a preference to people they worked before with, and so on and so forth.
Yeah, that's absolutely right.
But from what I've been seeing, the dev kit situation has been getting somewhat better. Indie devs who didn't are finally starting to get their dev kits if they weren't on like the short list.
Oh yeah, look, I mean, once the hardware is released, once the retail hardware is released, then absolutely it tends to get a lot easier to get access to the dev hardware. That's for sure. That's always been the case.
Right. So shifting to the specific titles, I suppose we should start with Sonic Mania. And Petty Fan, why don't you take this one?
I guess. Did you come to Sega about porting it, or did they come to you?
Yeah, they came to us. I mean, we've had a long-standing relationship with Sega. We did a couple of games on the Saturn, actually, conversions from arcade machines, from coin-op boxes, and that's a relationship that we've continued over the course of many, many years. And we've come close to working with them in the past, and we've had a dialogue with them over many of their properties, including Sonic, but in this instance, it was Sega of Japan who approached us, and they were already in development on Sonic Mania on PS4, Xbox One, and PC. And I guess when Nintendo announced the Switch, or when that became real, it's normal for a publisher to look at the titles that they've got in development and think, well, would any of these be a fit on this new platform? And I would imagine that they looked at Sonic Mania and they thought, yeah, why not? And it was already well known that we were working on the Switch, and obviously our relationship with Nintendo is public knowledge given The Legend of Zelda Twilight Princess HD. So we got the phone call. And, again, when you get the opportunity to work with Sonic or on a property like that, you tend to jump at that opportunity. So that was a deal that was done very quickly, actually. We agreed in a matter of days, and we were underway on Sonic Mania on the Switch.
I imagine you've become somewhat of an in-demand porting team.
Yeah, and look,
with Zelda and stuff.
Yeah, totally. And look, we don't just do ports; we do original titles as well. We're working on a big original game at the moment, but yeah, you get that reputation, or you develop that acumen, or you're on that short list for publishers when they've got conversions, and certainly we are. So that was one of the conversations we had, and it turned into a deal to make Sonic Mania for the Switch.
Now, are you involved in any of the development at all, or are you just strictly porting the game to the Switch?
Yeah, look, we're porting the game from those lead SKUs onto the Switch. So, porting, it is development because you're you're working in that same environment, but creatively and in terms of where the original code has come from, it's come primarily from Christian Whitehead, who's the lead developer on that title, working with Headcanon and Pagoda West Games. They're the brains and the brawn and the creative vision of the operation, that's for sure.
And will there be any exclusive Switch features, or is it just going to be a fairly straightforward port and have everything run like the PC not 360, Xbox One and PS4?
Yeah, it's pretty much a straight port. I mean, obviously, by virtue of the fact that it is the Switch, you've got the controllers and the touchscreen and so on. But we're not getting too fancy with this one. This is pretty much a straight down the line conversion. The game itself is so cool that remaining faithful to that's the best strategy, we think.
Will be playable presumably both in TV mode and in handheld mode?
Oh, absolutely, yeah, for sure.
Because apparently there are some games that aren't going to be able to do that.
Oh, is that right? That's a surprise.
Like mostly ones that use the touchscreen a lot, because you can't really use the touchscreen in docked mode.
Yeah, well, that's true. And yeah, look, you can play the 2-player multiplayer in our Switch version in both dock mode and on the Switch itself.
Cool.
That's everything I have, unless Adam has anything else.
Well, I want to ask about the conversion process itself. Has it been a smooth transition from the other platforms to the Switch?
Yeah, well, on Sonic Mania, certainly very, very smooth. The other game that we've announced that we're making is Rhyme, and that's a far bigger, more complicated title. So naturally, converting that from its original SKUs, PS4 and Xbox One and PC, onto the Switch is an order of magnitude more complicated than Sonic Mania. I mean, we always get it done, but it presents varying levels of technical challenge in terms of the problems that need to be solved.
We'll go into a bit more depth with Rhyme in a bit, but on Sonic Mania, given the relative parity with the other versions, would this be coming out in tandem with the other versions, or is this something that would be further down the line?
I believe it'll come out more or less at the same time as the lead SKUs.
That's good to hear. Because I've certainly heard the opposite on Rhyme, or actually the story was it was initially going to be released alongside the other SKUs in May, but I've heard that the Switch version has since been delayed. Is that true?
Look, I'm not sure where we stand in terms of hard release dates for either Rhyme or Sonic Mania.
Yeah, last I heard on Mania, it was like this summer. It got pushed back too.
Yeah. So, I mean, I can't comment on release dates or the prospect of simultaneous ship, not because I'm being secretive, but because that's out of my control, out of my hands. So we focus on making the game and delivering the gold master, and after that, it's out of our hands.
True enough. True enough. But I suppose what you can comment on is the development process, and what have you been doing to bring Rhyme to the Switch? What can Switch owners expect in comparison to like the PlayStation 4 version?
Well, look, again, Rhyme is a very faithful conversion from those lead SKUs, and it's not like you can up-res the art or play around with geometry or anything like that, bringing it from, say PS4 to Switch. I mean, it is already a big, beautiful game on PlayStation 4. The technical challenges, I suppose, are making it look and feel as big and beautiful on the Switch as it does on PS4, and for that matter on Xbox One and PC. So yeah, I mean, originally when we get the code base, we take a look at it, we play it on the original platform. So we sit around, we play it on PlayStation 4, and our plan with Rhyme was to replicate that insofar as we could. Let's try to make it look that good on the Switch as it does at present on PlayStation 4. So that's very much the benchmark, and that's harder to do with some titles than with others. And my very, very great hope is that people will look at the Switch version and say, yeah, well, it looks as good on the Switch as it does on PlayStation 4. And if we can achieve that, then I think we've done very well.
And what are you targeting in both portable mode and console mode?
Well, we're trying to make it look as close to the lead SKUs as possible. I mean, that's the benchmark, that's the goal. So we want it to be as compelling and beautiful as those lead SKUs.
Fair enough. So 1080p?
I don't know, to be honest. I'm not sure on Switch if that's what we get. You do realise I'm not technical, fellas, so you can't bamboozle me with too many challenging questions. That said, that is a fairly straightforward question that I probably should know the answer to, but I don't want to get it wrong.
Fair enough. It's like, we have all types on this program. Some are devs,
well,
some
you guys should know better than me. I mean, isn't what's TV mode on the Switch? Is that 1080p?
It should be. It should max at 1080, 60.
Yeah, it's usually devs try to target either 1080p 60 or 1080p 30 on TV mode, and when it comes to portable mode,
720 60.
60 or 720 30 is usually what happens more often.
And is 720 60 the maximum that you can get in portable mode?
Yes, that's due to the screen. The screen only goes up to 720p.
Yeah, got it. Yeah, so look, sorry, I don't know the answer to that question in terms of.
It's kind of dumb to try to put something with a 180 pixel resolution on something that literally physically only has 720 pixels.
Yeah.
Wide.
Sounds tough. Yeah.
Yeah, it's and of course there are other technical challenges frame rate's another big one.
Mm-hmm.
Well, absolutely. I mean, and so much of what we do in conversions like this revolves around frame rate and optimization, that constant process of optimization in order to get the thing running as smoothly as possible. And Rhyme's a good example of that.
Now, in terms of Rhyme, are you working closely with Tequila Works or Grey Fox on the project?
Well, with both, actually. So, Greybox, 6 Foot, are the publisher of the title. Tequila Works are very busy making their own game. So we work with our publisher, and they have a producer who's dedicated to our project, who's very hands-on. So we talk to him every day. He's coming down to visit us in a couple of weeks, actually. and he liaises with Tequila Works. Tequila Works are fantastic. I mean, they have put so much blood and sweat and energy into this title over several years, and they've given us everything we've needed. Absolutely. But part of what we try to do is leave the original developer alone wherever possible. So we want to be the kind of best behaved kid in the classroom, the one that no one has to worry about, and just kind of get along with our work. And look, I think we've done that on Rhyme. So the sense in which we've needed Tequila Works to help us out has been fairly minimal, but where we have, they've been there for us, absolutely.
That's good to hear. And once again, is this going to be a fairly straightforward port, or is there going to be like any sort of switch features?
Yeah, no, I mean it's interesting. It is. I mean, it's anything but a straightforward port in terms of the work that we've needed to do and the big brains that we've needed to allocate to it. But yeah, nothing major in terms of new features or functionality. We just want to bring the original title to Switch as faithfully as possible.
Makes sense. And right, I suppose getting low on questions here. I'll ask if there's anything you can talk about that hasn't, like other projects, either original reports.
Yeah, well, there's something else we're doing which is going to come out soon, and again, it is a port. We're doing City Skyline on Xbox One and Win 10. You know, the city builder that Paradox published in Sweden. So we've been working on that for a fair while, and that's been a challenge too. But it's nearly done, and it's going to come out pretty soon. It's a different genre for us, but a genre that we like, and one that presented its own set of challenges, but we're done, and like I say, it'll be shipping pretty soon. More details on the Paradox website.
Cool.
Yeah, and yeah, I mean, there's other stuff that we're doing that we can't talk about that's not announced, and it is a pretty busy time for us. You know, it ebbs and flows as a developer. Sometimes you don't have enough work, and sometimes you've got too much, and there doesn't tend to be rhyme or reason behind that. There's a lot of luck, actually, in terms of how all that goes. But at the moment, we've got a good slate of titles, and we're happy with the work that we're doing.
Sounds good. And you mentioned previously that you are also working on something original too.
Look, we always are. There's always titles that are kicking around here internally, and no exception at present. But nothing I say that I can share with you at the moment. Maybe next time.
Indeed.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and indeed, I look forward to the next time. Now, maybe it'll be a few years from now. Maybe it'll be sooner. I suppose it depends on what gets revealed.
Absolutely.
All right. I'll see if my colleagues have any last questions at this juncture.
I'm good.
So what can you tell us about all these things you can't tell us anything about?
I already told you.
It was worth a shot.
All right. I think that'll about do it. Tom?
Always a pleasure, guys. Good to chat.
It's good catching up after, so long. And it was a good time, and good luck to you on, Rhyme, Sonic Mania, and City Skyline.
Thank you very much. Cheers.
Yeah, no problem. All right, Petty Fan, play us to the next segment. All right, so welcome to the topic of discussion of the week. As announced last week, we're going to be talking about 3D platformers in relationship to the modern era. And this is stemming from, from Ukulele. So I'm not sure how many of our listeners have been paying attention to the reviews and the critiques and the, hullabaloo around the game. But there's, there's been a lot of contrition, especially in reviewer circles, about Yooka-Laylee. And, a lot of it surrounds, the question, is Yooka-Laylee too dated for the world? Is Yooka-Laylee too stale for the world? So on and so forth. Because, it is a game that is it's a game that's a deliberate throwback to late 90s rare platformers, specifically Banjo-Kazooie.
Indeed.
And, on the one hand, that's what the Kickstarter audience wanted. It's like they wanted a band as close as to Banjo-Kazooie 3 as you could get without actually getting to copyright infringements. But on the other hand, 1998, 2000, those years were a long time ago at this, like Banjo-Kazooie is almost 20 years old. And
and expectations of games in a lot of ways have changed.
Yeah, it's also, gaming has come a long way in 20 years. And the question that reckons is, is this style of gameplay still fit in the world? And it's a question that's more complicated than it seems. Because it's not a simple yes or no. Especially in relationship to Yooka-Laylee. Because you're using a 3D platformer that was specifically designed to be a throwback as your example.
Right. I mean, it's like if someone was trying to make let's say that there hadn't been a Mario game in like 20 years. I know there have, but let's just say. And then someone came out with a game that they had basically proposed as, it's going to be a new Mario game. And then it came out and it had spin dashing and it had like infinite jumping and I don't think people would be happy with that.
Ooh, I know this answer because this actually happened. It was called New Super Mario Brothers because in between 2D Mario games, you had a very big gap. You had, on the one hand, New Super Mario Brothers for the DS, and then you had Super Mario Land 2, 6 Golden Coins, which is about a gap of 13 years. And what
6 Golden Coins was that late?
1992.
Huh.
Yeah, it actually came out after Super Mario World.
I did not know that.
Well, there you go. You're learning things. Right. Point is, 13 years was a long time in between 2D Mario installments. And, people complained about New Super Mario Brothers. Some of it was valid.
Why does this game have wall jumps in it?
Yeah, some of it was valid, like, the fucking blue shell power-up being fucking useless. Like,
sometimes I found uses for it, mostly for the sliding. The level splitting was really awkward. The secret paths in that one, if I recall correctly.
right.
But yeah, no, and people were complaining about there being wall jumping in a 2D game.
Yeah, that sort of thing, and not being able to fly, even though that wasn't really part of the design of the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so on and so forth. And it didn't help that it's not only the fact that they're coming off very good games. The previous entries are, in both cases here, are some of the most vaunted, lauded games in their class in their time. You know,
Mhm.
whether it be Super Mario Land 2 or Super Mario World. You know, considered like Super Mario World is considered to be like the best Mario game ever by a lot of people.
Mhm.
You know, and the Banjo-Kazooie games, you know, are still very, very beloved even to this day. You know, you can argue whether or not the gameplay holds up or not, but I'm like, the character affection certainly does. If it didn't, then I don't think Ukulele would have happened.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like,
I can tell you right now, if Grunty weren't Grunty, nobody would remember Banjo-Kazooie.
you know,
Mm-hmm.
so the point of order is not only does you got questions of relevancy floating around, but it's also Ukulele has some big shoes to fill. And you know, the answer if they fill them, it seems sort of yes, but also no. You know, it's like, or to say, you know, there are some design elements here that are legitimately archaic and should not have been included. Um, you know, like chief among them is the camera system right out of the late '90s.
Mhm.
Like, you know, it's
That's
like
the
whoever
one that
said-
has the camera treated as a physical object, right?
Yes, and that is a very common trait among platformers of the late '90s to early 2000s. I can confirm that it's a thing in Voodoo Vince Remastered, but
In
at least
many ways, it's an improvement, but also that's the camera setting that's most likely to cause weird, dumb things when you get in a corner.
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it's got its problems. Like the another one of the biggest complaints about Ukulele in terms of design is some of the later missions are very long, and if you die, you've got to do everything over again. I'm like, it's
Yeah,
like
they did that with the original Banjo-Kazooie. Collect all 100 notes. Oh, you died. Well, you gotta collect all the ones you collected again, and then try to get 100 again.
yeah, it's like
Thankfully fixed in the Xbox version, but
yeah. Although that caused some issues there because the game, like, it was because like certain things weren't programmed for having the notes be collected for all time. And once again, you know, as it happens, we are actually reviewing a 3D platforming game this Sunday, Voodoo Vince Remastered. Now, this is a game from 2003, so it's kind of in the, you know, it's got some of the design problems of, you know, that era of platforms, but it's also got some of the improvements as well. For example, it came out on a system with dual analog controllers.
Mhm. Which,
like-
if nothing else, makes controlling the camera easier.
Right, because you know, for those of you who never experienced the joys of controlling a camera, a 3D camera without a second analog stick,
There's a special pit in hell for that.
Uh-huh.
fuck, I'm just glad Sony had that good idea. Yeah, it was Sony who came up with the second analog controller method here, and it, you know, it eventually got applied to using the camera in third person. You know, most of the time, there were still some devs that got funny with the controllers, but that, you know, the point is, using an actual analog stick to control your camera is much better than, you know, 4 face buttons or the shoulder buttons or, you know, whatever substitute you can think of for it for an actual analog stick. I'm like, you know, so I say, you know, be glad for that. But, you know, but camera is like one of the essential questions to our discussion here, because camera has always been the bane of 3D platformers since
Indeed.
like probably the beginning. And by the way, the beginning wasn't Super Mario 64. There were actually 3D platform games before the Super Mario 64. Not many, but they did exist. You know,
A lot of them were really terrible.
some of them were still are still classics, like the Jumping Flash series.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's like and
Wow,
also
first-person platform, 3D platforming.
it's like they actually made that work, which believe me is not a easy feat to do in any era. Because
It
good
helps that your
God,
jumps are rocket powered and you can look straight down.
yeah, it's like because good God, jumping in first person shooters sucked. I'm like, without fail. And I'm glad that most platformers aren't that. I mean, you know, there is like Mirror's Edge, which is like sort of a platform game, like or in the neighborhood with the parkour stuff.
Mhm.
But I'm like 3D platforming can actually be traced all the way back to the early 80s, and a game called iRobot. It's a fairly obscure release. I think it came out in, I want to say, like, somewhere between 81 to 83. Like, it was a game that was, like, literally 15 years ahead of its time. Because it was a 3D platform. But you didn't do a lot, like, you know, what you had to do was you had to reach this thing called Big Brother and dismantle it, but it would give you orders like no jumping, and if it saw you jumping, you'd get blasted. Yeah, really interesting stuff. But you know, like I said, it was really ahead of its time. You know, like literally the world's first 3D platformer. So yeah, the gaming public of the early 80s didn't know what to make of it. So it kind of languishes in obscurity to this day. Now, but anyway, getting back to the camera problem, I'm like, the camera has always been an issue, especially with 3D platforming games that deal with actual platforming. Like, you know,
Which is not all of them for weird reasons.
yeah, like Rare's brand of platformers were actually usually pretty light on the platforming. It's like they were almost really 3D action games more than platformers, especially like Banjo-Kazooie or Donkey Kong 64 comes to mind. Because you know that was, you got to remember Rare's raison d'etre, or however you pronounce that. Collecting was the focus, not jumping. Jumping was just a means to an end.
Yeah, you needed to do okay at jumping sometimes to get to where you needed to collect stuff.
Whereas Nintendo, they're the ones who really emphasized jumping in a 3D platform game. To this
for
day,
getting to the end of the level.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, to this day, because they've been one of the only companies to carry on the 3D gaming, 3D platforming torch through the ages. I mean, it helps when you have the world's most popular icon, and you know, platforming is always going to be his mainline game, no matter how many more units the Mario Kart series sells. Now, and of course, that brings us to the Mario Galaxy games. You know, considered to be by many the greatest. You know, not just like 3D platformers, but like some of the two of the greatest platformers ever. You know, and you know they managed to make that game work by having a very dynamic camera. It's especially impressive because that game was set up to use the Wiimote nunchuck. So you didn't have a second analog stick there.
Right, you had an analog stick, and then on the other controller there was a D-pad, and also you could wiggle both of them.
Right. And the fact that that game is as, you know, the games are as amazing as they are, is truly a testament to Nintendo's skills as a developer. Of course, the Mario Galaxy games have so many more innovations going for them. Jeez.
The Mario Galaxy specifically, I think the thing that it did the best that a lot of things had issues with is they really nailed being able to keep moving smoothly while the camera changes.
Yeah. Also, the shift to the whole planetoid gimmick, allowed for a lot of different types of jumping. Anti-gravity jumping, 360 jumping, and so on and so forth. A lot of jumping you didn't see in platformers previous to that. And they made it work. They made it good. They made all this off-kilter platforming, and they hit it out of the park.
Mm-hmm.
And on the flip side of the coin, you have the Super Mario 3D Land and 3D World, which are
they're good, but they're a little bit limited.
Well, it's like, okay, first of all, Super Mario 3D Land is a 3DS title. It's a it's a full-on 3D platformer on a handheld.
Mm-hmm.
You honestly don't see a lot of those.
No, you don't, for reasons involving like
Resource.
the amount of stuff you have to have on the screen and how much it takes to process all of that.
Right. And I'm like, the fact that Super Mario 3D Land is limited is because it's on the 3DS. Like, if you were expecting that to rival Mario fucking Galaxy, I don't know what you were expecting. Like, at all. But, that clearly that a 3DS game isn't going to rival a console game most of the time.
Unless it was a console from several generations ago.
Right. But in terms of 3D World, the limits are by design. And that's because Nintendo was, even though it's limited in its design and its camera and all that stuff, to more reflect the 2D games, and it's also because they had multiplayer.
Mm-hmm. Right, which there's limitations on what you can do in multiplayer without being a complete dick.
And also, having a freeform camera in a multiplayer 3D platformer, that just sounds like the stuff of nightmares.
Yeah, for starters, you have multiple people who should be able to control the camera, which is usually not a good thing.
Yeah, it's like... Yeah, it's like in trying to play that shit split screen isn't gonna happen. Like, and I'm not sure how online functionality would work in a case like that, because I imagine latency would be an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah, it's especially on some of the quicker stages.
Yeah.
Like, hey, Ogre, you're still here, right?
Yeah.
Confirm to me that doing some of the faster beat block stuff was bad enough without any latency problems.
For the 3DS version?
For either of them.
I didn't care for the beat blocks at all.
Like I said, it's bad enough without latency issues.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah. So as long as Mario is still making, is still getting games, we're always going to have some innovation in the 3D platforming space, because, like I said, that's what he's going to. That's what he's does, and that's what he's going to do.
Yeah, Mario's going to be having a new 3D platformer this fall with Mario Odyssey.
Which, interestingly, they're saying is going back to being more open and stuff after the last several have been kind of small world at a time.
Well, it's because they finally found a new grand setting, and it's actually kind of a surprise that it took them this long to think of it. Bring Mario to the big city. Now, Mario
he hasn't really been in a real city since like Donkey Kong, and then there was the tropical island thing in Sunshine.
But that was a beach resort town. There's a difference between that and he's basically in New York.
Right.
Like,
Yep.
you know, there's a figurative world of difference here between New Donk City and Delfino Bay.
Right.
But shifting away from Mario for a bit, there are interesting developments happening elsewhere in the 3D platforming space. Maybe not a lot, because once again, the 3D platformer is starting to see a bit of a revival, obviously with like Yooka-Laylee and Voodoo Vince getting its almost inexplicable remastering. But like you're not going to see like the indie scene really working in the 3D space that they are working in the 2D space. Like,
for one thing, it takes a lot more resources to make a good 3D game than it does to make a good 2D game.
Yeah, it's also a lot harder in general to make 3D work versus 2D. So that's why we're not ever going to be drowning in like Metroid style 3D platformers. Although worth noting, we did talk about one of those yesterday in the game Faye, which really sounds interesting. Unfortunately, EA is publishing it, so I'm never going to play it. I'm not down with Origin. That's just not a thing that's happening. But also, a recent game called Snake Pass got released, which has been getting mostly favorable reviews. Even though Elmo didn't like it. But
I can understand there seem to be some things with it that are awkward.
I think the problems are coming from it's a snake simulator first and a 3D puzzle platformer second. It's like really all the emphasis is around moving Noodle, and that's the thing about Snake Pass. It's the first 3D platformer I've seen in a long time that I can really say is a really modern platformer. And that's because of the way Noodle moves. Learning the tech behind what's going on here, there's a lot going on here because Noodle moves like how an actual snake moves. And that actually requires a lot of power.
Because you gotta have lots of joints on a snake for it to be able to slither back and forth and move forward based on that, and
right.
climb and curl around things.
Yeah, there's a lot of physics going on in this game. The problem is, some of the problems are once again 3D platforming problems. The camera doesn't always cooperate. But some of it is like the collectibles. The collectibles are there just for the sake of collecting, and they don't do anything.
Yeah, it would be nice if they did more.
Which is almost a cardinal sin of gaming in general, not just platformers, but usually you want your collectibles to do something.
Besides just being a sticker for 100% completion.
Right. I mean, even in like Super Mario 64, collecting the stars opened up new areas.
And collecting the coins got you extra lives.
It's like, it's like there are those people who will collect for the sake of achievements or completion's sake, but I'm of the school that says, yeah, if I'm going to be collecting things, let them affect gameplay in some fashion.
Yeah, and even if like collecting all of the things isn't necessary, there should be something for like some of them.
Right.
Like the Korok seeds in Breath of the Wild. No, you don't need to collect all 900, but you're going to want to get some of them unless you enjoy running around with only like 5 weapons that are all going to break eventually.
Right. So, so as far as the 3D platforming genre goes, it's nice to see it getting a breath of life. And it's like the throwback idea is fine, but I'd rather not the genre linger in the past, because I think, not only has gaming advanced a long way, but nostalgia revivals don't last long.
Yeah.
If the 3D platformer is still treading on, throwbacks to 20 years ago without doing new things, it's going to go back into the void outside of the franchise players, which are
there are improvements even in like ukulele though. Like something that someone pointed out to me that I didn't even notice from watching and playing it is ukulele doesn't require you to collect ammunition and feathers to shoot and fly. Instead, it's based on a recharging energy gauge and stuff for, player convenience. But, you're not going to do everything.
right. So, yeah, I think there's room for both, basically.
Mm-hmm.
It's just, don't ever expect like this to become the next roguelike or, insert oversaturated indie genre here.
Well, it would work if it became what roguelikes have become, where there are like so many things that a lot of them are only related in a few ways. But
I mean, well, the point is, the reason why that's happened is because of variants to stand out. It's like being a straight roguelite or roguelike is liable to get you buried under an avalanche of similar looking games. It's like being a 2D retro platformer or puzzle platformer. It's like if you don't have at least a twist, a gimmick, or whatever, you're probably not going to stand out unless you are really, really good at what you're doing, or you've got a specific pedigree. Anyway, the point is, I just don't ever see that happening with 3D platformers ever again. Like, I just don't see them ever becoming a dominant genre again. But there's room for, them in the digital download space.
Mm-hmm.
Well, and there are more genres now than there were before, so.
Right.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that'll about do it for this installment of Fragments of Silicon. Right, so the week ahead. Well, first of all, we do have MSP coming up in about half an hour. It's going to be a very special show. It's going to be the 8th anniversary of that particular program.
Mm-hmm.
Not always active, but
We've existed.
Yeah, the show has existed since 2009. Not exactly sure what we're going to do on the show itself, but we'll come up with something. Let's see. On Sunday, we will be reviewing Voodoo Vince Remastered, as previously mentioned, and also Rain World. So I have actually played a bit of Rain World.
And you're the only one who got that, right?
Yes, like I said, if you guys want it, you have to buy it. So
it's on Steam-ish.
Yeah, it's on Steam,
Yes.
of course. It's an odd game. It's also it's kind of a brutal game. I do need to put more time in it, but Voodoo Vince being a 3D platformer takes a bit of time. This was a full-fledged Xbox release. It's going faster than I thought, but it's still taking some time. Anyway, those are the reviews, and next week on Tuesday we have another Tuesday interview after all, because our good friend Ralph Egas of Abstraction Games is stepping in for our third interview. He's got a bunch of we're going to be talking about more ports, because he's working on a shitload of ports. He gave me the entire list today, so that'll be handy.
Oh man, ports. Porting them ports into Portville.
Thank you for that.
I could have said Portland, then it would be right near me.
Portlandia would have worked better.
Toot.
Yeah.
Oh, don't even mention Portlandia.
Yeah.
Sorry, I think I haven't actually checked with other Mainers, but I think all Mainers are obligated to hate Portland, Oregon.
Because
Because they stole our town name.
I'm sure there's a fascinating history there, but we don't have time for it right now.
Mhm.
Anyway, getting back to programming, next Wednesday, April 26th, we will be having Benedict Fritz of AEIOWU. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be pronounced, if that's an acronym or an initialism. So we'll find out next week. But they're working on the game Tumbleseed. Speaking of roguelikes, this is a new one.
That counts as a roguelike?
Yeah, or a roguelite. One of the two. It's roguish.
It's partially procedurally generated, you mean? Because it looked to me almost like a top-down shooter where you can't shoot and just have to avoid stuff and you control weirdly.
Yeah, it is. It is partially procedural. It is procedurally generated, and
If it's roguish, why isn't Thancred in there? Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, and good night.
we'll probably be reviewing that in a few weeks, provided they give us the codes.
Mhm.
But yeah, that is the week ahead for Fragments of Silicon. I'm looking forward to it, and I hope you're looking forward to it as well. And until next time, I wish you good gaming.